So, Cal, you were once the program director in What's Up magazine. Can you tell me why you decided to do this work and what the purpose of What's Up magazine was?
The purpose of What's Up was to kind of bring arts and social awareness together through the medium of a street magazine and use it as an opportunity to kind of both empower low-income individuals as an opportunity to make money, but also spread awareness through arts in the magazine. And I had been kind of on the steering committee for What's Up for many years and thought it was a nice transition into working there as a way to kind of strengthen the program aspect of it. I had a history of working within hunger and homelessness issues, so I felt that it was a nice blend between kind of the service work as well as more kind of social activism as well.
So how long were you at What's Up magazine?
I was on staff for just shy of 2 years, and I was on the steering committee for about 4 years prior to that. And I was also at the time living at a Haley House building, which What's Up was part of. So I was kind of, all told, about 6 or 7 years kind of in the What's Up community.
So can you tell me a little bit more about the team and what it took to produce a magazine like What's Up?
Sure. It was, 95% volunteer run. For many, many years, there was no paid staff. For about 4 of those years, we had either part-time program director or a part-time program director and a arts editor who also lived in Haley House housing and was able to kind of blend some money and rent for a staff position. So being an all-volunteer run magazine, it was, really on the volunteer community to put the magazine out. So there's a team of editors who, were split between news and arts. The writers were all volunteers, so the editors essentially had to stay on top of volunteer writers, which is really difficult to ask volunteers to meet deadlines. And on the program side, we, had to sell ads and then also go through the production of the magazine. So for many, many years, the magazine was actually every other month, and then we switched for a couple of years producing it monthly, which, just kind of stepped up the timing of it. And, pretty much for the 2 or 3 nights prior to sending it to the press, there were most, all-nighters by volunteer staff. And a lot of heart and soul went into that. Any production or program or organization that's volunteer run gets a lot of heart and soul of volunteers. So I think it was unique in that way.
Sounds like it was a labor of love, definitely. So I know that Darrell Jones was part of What's Up magazine. It was in charge of the Hood Report. How was it working with him and having him do all this work while behind bars? Because that's a strange model.
It is a strange model, but it's also a model that, with writing in a magazine, it was one that, a lot of actually writers stayed. There's some writers, not all the writers and contributors were in Boston, so a lot of it just happened via email and electronically. So in that instance, we treated, Darrell was the same way. I think probably a little bit more the challenging part was on his end, which I don't know kind of how difficult it was to actually access, computers and the actual tools to write that. But I know that he was a very reliable contributor, always met his deadlines, and there was always a lot of back and forth around the editing process for that column. So I think it, at the end of the day, it worked for everyone.
So also Darrell was able to bring in a few good interviews under the Hood Report, as well as helping expand its reputation and reach into certain communities. What are your thoughts on that?
I think anytime you can have a writer with Darrell's background, it adds a tremendous amount of value and credibility to what you're trying to cover. I think with all due respect to a lot of our volunteers, a lot of the volunteers kind of came from the social justice kind of white privileged background. So to have someone like Darrell who actually, lived what we're all trying to kind of achieve was incredibly helpful and added a lot of just credibility to what we're trying to doing, but also added a lot of opportunities for people who read his column to really understand kind of the experiences that he went through and many others like him.
Yeah.
I think in an ideal world, there would be, the dailies would have someone like Darrell writing some of the news stories and some of the columns, because the perspective that he can lend is a very real perspective that, not everyone has the experience to go through.
So after What's Up, you went to work for City Councillor Arroyo. How was that experience, and why did you make that transition?
I think I made the transition because he literally called and said, "Hey, would you come and work for me?" And I thought it was a really, at the time, interesting opportunity to kind of, a lot of my I was becoming a little bit more politically active and aware. And a lot of my work had been, campaign work kind of in the community. So I thought it was a really interesting opportunity to kind of go, into City Hall and see how city government and the city council works, from the inside. So I had a great opportunity to learn. I mean, Felix is one of the brightest and most kind of morally based folks I've ever been around. So I think I had an opportunity to learn a tremendous amount from him, but also, made a lot of great contacts and built strong relationships, and also acquired a strong understanding of kind of local government as well as state government and how policy is formed and everything that goes into kind of the nuanced approach to city government.
I like that nuanced approach, city. I'm going to have to use that. So while in Arroyo's office, you maintained a relationship with Darrell and began the drive to get more representatives such as Arroyo and Chuck Turner to come up to Bridgewater. Why was that important? Why did you see that as important?
I think that somewhat coincided on some of the attention and awareness around Corey reform, and so I think there's a natural connection between Corey reform and someone who has experienced what Darrell has. And I think, although Chuck and Felix both come from the community, so I think they already had a very strong understanding of what are some of the barriers and challenges and the life experience that folks have gone through that have Corey's. It was still really important for them to kind of, sit face to face with Darrell, understand, what he's been through, but also just like the physical environment of what he experiences on a day-to-day life, on a day-to-day basis. And I remember, the first time I went to visit him was essentially the first time I've ever been, behind the walls, which, more than meeting him and just, Darrell as a person, I took away a lot just from being able to walk into, but also more importantly, out of a prison, and knowing that not everyone has that opportunity was, for me, as much of a learning experience as the personal relationship that I built with Darrell. So I think that having, Chuck and Felix having that opportunity was really important as well.
So at a point, you, Darrell, and Calvin had both Arroyo and Councillor Turner commitment to go to the prison. Tell us about what the process was like to get them in and the meeting.
I honestly don't remember a lot of the logistics. I know that my personal experience when I went to visit Darrell, we had to send, our names in beforehand, and we had to fax over our identification cards, and we had to go, and, when we went, you went through the whole, empty your pockets and kind of the taser, not the taser search, but the wand, thankfully, the wand kind of pat down or shake down. So, that's what I personally experienced. I don't honestly recall kind of the logistics that went into, Councillor Turner and Felix going as well.
Okay. So my last question is, Darrell had the Back to a Village website, which through working with mothers was aimed at reducing violence in the city. What do you think about this effort, considering that he's incarcerated?
I think it's commendable that he has chosen to pursue a path in which he is trying to, further educate, increase awareness around, the issues that are facing, communities, particularly communities of color. I think for me, it goes beyond, guilty or innocent for Darrell. It's more about, regardless of his situation, he has taken upon himself to kind of use his situation in a positive way. So I think the more that we can get folks like that and others from the community to participate in that way, the more impact that we'll have, and the more education that they'll be able to help folks like myself who do not come from a background like that. So being able to, experience firsthand and learn through their participation in a system like that, I think it's tremendously important. And the more that we can have folks from the community leading efforts such as that, I think the more successful we will be in addressing whatever the, education disparities or community violence or, name the issue, but the more folks that we can have that are directly impacted that leading those efforts, I think the more successful we'll be in affecting kind of true community change.
Great, thank you.